Welcome to Aston Means Business. I'm Steve Dyson, the journalist presenting this regular podcast for Aston Business School. This podcast is focusing on how small businesses, known as SMEs, are coping with the huge economic disruption caused by the coronavirus pandemic. Our special series is called Aston Means Business, SMEs Dealing with COVID-19. We're talking to businesses who are taking part, or who've previously taken part, in Aston Centre for Growth's programmes, and we're giving them a voice to discuss their challenges, share their experiences and explain how they're coping with the crisis. We're also interviewing some of Aston Business School's top academics and other experts, getting their valuable insight, analysis and advice for SMEs. In today's episode, we're going to find out how COVID-19 has actually resulted in a huge increase in business for one Midlands SME called the Little Soap Company. We're also going to talk to Mark Hart. He's the Professor of Small Business and Entrepreneurship at Aston Business School. Please bear with us as all recordings are carried out remotely online to make sure we conform to the government's current stay-at-home advice. Okay, joining me online now is Emma Heathcote-James. Now, Emma's the founder and managing director of the Little Soap Company, which is based in Broadway, Worcestershire. Hello to you, Emma.
Hi, how are you doing?
I'm fine, thank you, and thanks very much for taking the time to join us. Emma, tell us a bit more about the Little Soap Company. The name itself is a bit of a giveaway, but how and when was the company formed, and tell us exactly what it does.
So I created the business back in 2008 with the very simple aim to make pure natural soap accessible to all. And there's genuine provenance there. I began making it on the kitchen table and went selling it at farmers markets to it now being sold in all of the leading supermarkets today. The name, though, is a slight misnomer as we're not really that little anymore, but we're not massive either. we never planned it to get to this stage. It was meant to be my relaxing hobby business to get me off the laptop, which I do remind the team regularly. So in terms of what we've done as a business, we've got several firsts under our belt. We brought the first organic bar soap to the supermarket shelf. We were then the first natural and free from bar that went to shelf. And more recently, with our new Eco Warrior range, we're the first functional bar soap to shelf. So putting what is traditionally bottled into bar form, so shampoo, exfoliating scrub, shaving foam, face wash and shower gel, that sort of thing, which reduces the need for unnecessary bottles in bathrooms. We're a very eco company, so that kind of thing is really important to us. I guess we're also the first ethical bar soap in the supermarkets, and sadly only in quite a few of them. We're RSPO certified sustainable palm. We're also certified cruelty-free and vegan, and we're just going through our B Corp certification, which is really exciting and something of all the certifications I think is the most important to me.
Sounds fantastic. And just to give our listeners a bit more of a picture, just give us a brief summary of your turnover, staff numbers, and your leading customer names.
Sure. So our last financial year, we did 1.2 million. This year, we're looking at doing 2 million and projections to reach around 5 million in the next 3 years. So as I said, we are still quite small. We've got a 30 plus strong team with our headquarters in Broadway in the North Cotswolds. There's only 6 of the team that are normally based there. Everybody else works remotely across the UK. Customers, I've always been one to have really grand aspirations. So when it started off on my kitchen table, 3 months in, I got into the local chain of Warner Budgeons. Within 6 months of trading, I was in Waitrose as a local hero, still with the handmade bars that I was making on the kitchen table. 18 months later, I went regionally into Tesco and then upscaled and went nationally into all the other stores. So we're currently in Waitrose, Sainsbury's, Booths, Tesco, Asda. And online stores, we're in Ocado, Fetch, Amazon, and there's quite a few others planned for later on this year, which with Corona have just been paused temporarily.
It sounds great. It sounds like you're making a real success of the company. And from the sound of your products and customer base, I'd imagine that Little Soap Company is bucking the trend and enjoying a surge in orders despite COVID-19. Am I right?
You are right. Yes, soap's more important than ever to everybody. So yes, absolutely. And we know how incredibly fortunate that we are. And we're equally massively aware how many businesses have had to shift all their sales online or had to close or temporarily pause. So where our kind of fortunate kind of lies is that all our main outlets, the supermarkets, are both physical brick buildings, and their .coms are obviously all been allowed to remain open. And all the other delivery services as well, Ocado, Amazon, are all operational throughout lockdown. So we're really, really fortunate. And we've also got our own website as well. So our strength has always been spreading risk and not having eggs all in one basket. And I guess that's what served us in the current situation, and obviously something we're going to continue to do. But, and there's a big but, a surge in orders doesn't necessarily correlate to fulfilled orders. And that's been a problem for, I think, most of the producers for the supermarkets. We all remember the empty shelves just before lockdown, and it was just unprecedented. Like most businesses, we hold around 3 months stock, constantly making to maintain that stock. But as an example, we delivered 3 months of stock into Asda in the first 2 weeks, and everyone was panic buying. So we were suddenly
Wow.
left with a lot of lines without any stock to put back in. We've also had massive issues with bottles and pumps. There's a shortage worldwide because everyone's making, copious amounts of hand sanitizer. So fortunately, all of our supply chain has remained open. They're all deemed key workers. But as a business, I must say it's been the hardest, busiest 6 weeks just to maintain the supply chain, to keep up with that demand and kind of future-proof us for the months ahead, because we don't know what's going to happen with our factory's going to remain open. We just don't know. So empty shelves, we literally weren't able to meet supply over demand like many others. We were set to launch in Morrisons, Superdrug, Lloyd's Chemist, but all of that's been temporarily paused. All range changes have been paused in all of the supermarkets. All promotions have been paused because there aren't enough people in store to change the barcodes and keep that. So it's been really, really interesting how things have happened. But the one really great thing is collaboration, and the buyers have been working so much better with us. The relationships have changed. There's a lot more collaboration. And payment terms have finally changed, which has always been a massive issue. Some supermarkets pay us 75 days with a 3% early payment discount. It's outrageous. But many of them have changed, and we've been paying by some in 24 hours, 48 hours, 5 days with some of them. And, as we all know, cash is king, isn't it, in crises like these, and having to buy so much stock up front to get in, it's massively helped us as a small business.
I bet it has. And despite the increase in demand overall, how are you as a company rising to the challenge of all the restrictions in place, and how have your staff and suppliers responded?
It's business as usual for us, to be totally honest. All our supply chain, everybody's open as usual. Our factories are working as much as they can with the 2 metre rule in place. I think 80%, I'd say, absolutely, it's possible to do that. We haven't, in terms of restrictions, all of the team are working from home. It's not affecting us. The only thing that really is affecting us is this kind of massive bottle shortage and pump shortage. But again, fortunately, only 3 out of our 20 odd lines are bottled. So we are lucky that we're predominantly bar soap, which does help a lot. And we're really fortunate that we manufacture in Britain, which is something I've been really, banging my drum about since day one. And even with the law of Brexit, we didn't move over to Europe. So we're very fortunate we have that control, and everything's here in Great Britain.
That's good. And what's your view, Emma, on how the crisis has changed your operations? I mean, things like travel and meetings, and how do you see that kind of IT change developing once we return to some kind of normality?
Do you know what? It's changed things quite drastically for us. One thing that's interesting, I started the productivity through people course last year and went over and saw Good Fish on Valentine's Day last year. And Greg there was talking about how he'd moved everything operationally up into the cloud. And 2019 for us was a big year of growth. We kind of, I think it was quadrupled the team. It was a year of putting systems and processes into place. So Greg's words did ring quite well in my head as we were putting things into place. We moved all of our email to 365. We were already on Zero. We moved our HR into the cloud. We moved our project management into the cloud. We looked at putting an ERP system in. So I'm really proud to say, because of PTP, we moved everything immediately to the cloud because we were in a position where we were able to. And that has just served us so well. So, I think probably 20, 26, 25 of the team already work remotely. the team that worked at HQ just literally picked up their iMacs that evening and took them home and able to access everything, obviously, because it's cloud-based. The one thing that's been really interesting for us as a team, we have 4 away days, one every quarter, where the whole team get together. But we've been having whole team meetings every Wednesday morning, which has just been lovely. And the team's been collaborating and getting on with each other and asking questions and just working so much better as a whole because we're seeing each other kind of 4 times a month plus. So I think working remotely has really changed us as a team and made us a lot more cohesive. In terms of the buyer meetings, I spend a lot of time on the road. I have quarterly meetings with all of the retailers. Some of them, up to Asda, it's 4 hours in the car there, 4 hours back for an hour meeting. It's a day out of the diary for every single one. And the traveling is one thing I've always struggled with, and it's not great on the planet, but the retailers never wanted to do Zoom or Teams. But actually, they've had to now, and all of them are commenting how it just works just the same, if not better. I'd argue it works a lot better. It's so lovely having a glimpse into buyers' lives and a cat walking across the keyboard and a kind of stray hand with a cup of tea. It humanises everything, and it makes it a lot more real. Whereas when you're sat in a glass corporate meeting room that's completely bare, not even with a drink in your hand half the time, it's a very different kind of quite staid and dull meeting. So I think it's changed things. It's changed things for the better in many, many ways in that respect.
That's good to hear. That's good to hear. From listening to you, Emma, you've obviously, as a business, been quite agile and nimble, and you've coped with things in a very positive way. Obviously, you are in a sector which is expanding at the moment, and people want more of you. But overall, as a business, for other people listening out there, for other SMEs, what top tips do you have for them on how to get through this, and importantly, on preparing for life after COVID-19?
Do you know what? It's really interesting, and who am I to say? I don't know anything. We've just been, privy to a set of complete coincidences in terms of how we've survived as a business. I think for us, it's having more than one route to market. And I've sat on many, many meetings in the past where people have whinged and moaned about the decline of the high street and how online is taking over and how Amazon and the .coms are all ruining, kind of like local stores. And one thing I always talk about, there's a women's clothes shop that is in our local town in Stratford upon Avon. I've used it for the last probably 25 years. I used to travel half an hour to get to it when I used to live in a different place. And as soon as online happened, she moved everything online. So she's got a physical little shop and she's got the online shop as well. And she bent and she flexed and she was agile. And that online shop now, she's not just a local Stratford upon Avon clothes shop, she is a global shop. And I think that is absolutely fascinating. And there's so much we can learn from that. There was another little bakery that opened, I think it was a couple of weeks before lockdown here. I felt so sorry for them when lockdown happened because, of course, they weren't able to take advantage of the furlough scheme because, they had no staff on the books. And, what would most people do in that crisis? They had no choice but to make it work. And they created a hatch so people could adhere to the 2-meter distancing. They're still making their sourdough. They're open
Brilliant.
5 days a week. They're doing donuts. They're doing coffee. It's the only place other than the big supermarkets that's open. And it's absolutely wonderful that it can be done. And when needs must, we can all think differently. They're bringing in essentials like eggs and milk and bread and I think vegetables, etc. And they're looking after other local suppliers who can't put into the supermarkets for various reasons. So it is just thinking outside the box, isn't it? And just having lots of different routes to market.
That's brilliant. It's really good to hear how you're getting on and also your views of other local businesses. Emma Heathcote-James, the founder and managing director of the Little Soap Company, many thanks for joining us and best wishes to you and all yours as we get through this.
Thank you.
I now want to talk to Mark Hart. Mark's the Professor of Small Business and Entrepreneurship at Aston Business School. Hello to you, Mark.
Good to join you again.
It's good to have you on board with the podcast, Mark. Mark, you heard my interview just now with Emma Heathcote-James, the founder of the Little Soap Company. And as we heard, it's seen huge demand from all major supermarkets and other major customers, a demand that's growing even bigger during COVID-19. It's an incredible success story, isn't it?
Well, what really is, I remember visiting the premises in Broadway when Emma had just moved basically from her kitchen table into a little premises. in Broadway on the high street, and she was just really sharing her vision. And at that stage, she just finished a program with us at Aston, the Goldman Sachs program, and she was saying, what next? And she was setting up a little training school. She thought that was her big expansion in terms of teaching people how to make organic soap in the premises, which is quite fun. But she also had this big ambition to build a national brand, and that was very clear from Emma early doors. And as she said, getting into Waitrose was it was tough. It took her a while, and she certainly had a few got her eyes opened actually in terms of what it meant dealing with one of the biggies in the supermarkets. And there's a few stories that she would tell over a glass of wine about that. But look, yes, she's built that brand, and as she said, what better time to have a soap company in the current crisis where washing your hands became the mantra from the end of January onwards. So yes, she's had a very. Let's be clear. Emma's success was there last year and the year before. Now she's actually just one of those businesses in a crisis who's actually outperforming even their plans for 2020.
Yeah, no, it's really encouraging to hear how she's gambolling into more success. It's nice to hear that some businesses are still getting on well. And what's also good to hear is that she seems to be beginning to experience better handling by the big chain buyers and improved payment terms to enable her company's growth. It would be nice, wouldn't it? It would be nice if this was happening across the wider business world for SMEs.
Well, it isn't happening across the piece, and that's one of the big problems that we've got. And, cash is really important for any business, and especially micro businesses at this stage. And, one of the things that many of us were calling for, including FSB, the British Chamber, people like Adam Marshall, Mike Jerry, was to say, look, if you've got invoices in your system as a large tier one, whether it's a large manufacturer or the supermarkets, would be simply pay your invoices in 24 hours. If you've got an invoice legitimately in your system, the POs and everything else done, just pay the money, because that's about doing the right thing, and I think that's really important. So Emma, given her relationship, and obviously, with the diversification as well, she hasn't just got all her output in the hands of one large multiple. She's built up a reputation, and the story she told about getting paid within 5 days, within hours, is just amazing. If everybody did that, it would ease a lot of pressure on the hundreds of thousands of small businesses across the country. The legislation's there, but as you were saying, 75 days has been the norm in previous years, and that's just not acceptable. It should be 30 days, end off.
Sure, and let's hope some of those chains are listening and will take note of that. As well as growing demand for her products, Emma talked in detail about how the pandemic's changed the way she and Little Soap Company is working. Zoom replacing day-long journeys for meetings with buyers, for example, and more virtual meetings with her staff and suppliers. It seems like there's some permanent changes for small businesses going on here, doesn't it?
Well, I think that's the case. I don't think it's to do with small businesses per se. I think it's true of the world of work. And I think that, it's not just, work at home Friday we're talking about now. People have been, working from home for 5, 6, 7 weeks. And I think it's beginning to dawn on a lot of employers that, in fact, rather than seeing this as an opportunity for perhaps some of the staff to not be as productive, I think that they're coming around to the fact that, look, they've got more connectivity with their staff perhaps than they ever did. The fact that Emma, for example, has a team on the road, but, so that, in the past, maybe it was just dropping into the office at the end of a week or the end of a day. There's now more connectivity between all her 30 odd staff that she's got, which I think is absolutely terrific. And I think it's happening across the world of work in all sorts of businesses, large and small, public and private. And I think that, this crisis has shown that, the amount of time people spend commuting, traveling, is just dead time. And if we can organise our activity in business better, then we should embrace it. And Emma was talking about this when she went to visit another business we know well at Aston, Greg McDonald from Goodfish in Cannock. The cloud, he suddenly revealed that Emma needed to do a wee bit more. And again, that's what that whole Productivity Through People program is about. It's about these incremental changes that you can make in a business, not the great sort of drop on your foot big idea. It's about the small changes that you can make. And Emma's embraced that, and that's prepared her very well for working remotely. And I think because that's the important point. If you've got the cloud set up with all your systems and all your data, etc., then working remotely just is the obvious thing to do. But if you haven't got it set up, it makes it more difficult, obviously. And again, that's part of the work that we do at Aston to try and ensure that people are embracing digital technologies, web-based and cloud-based technologies to enable their business to develop and grow.
No, that's great stuff. Despite Little Soap Company's success, though, she and other businesses are still facing challenges of getting supplies to themselves and growing their production and logistics during the pandemic. What steps can central government consider for SMEs to start emerging from the lockdown?
This is a very difficult question. Emma's tied into a supply chain. If her factory falls over and it's UK based, as she said, which makes it easier for her, if that falls over because of their issues about other clients that they work for, there's other suppliers to them. So it's making sure that when we ease lockdown, if we ever get to that stage in the near future, and I'm not sure, what that's going to be like, then we've got to make sure that the rules around social distancing in the workplace are fully understood. There's a very active discussion at last happening about that. So Emma's it's not just about her business, and we've got to make sure that there's very complex supply chains across the piece, and we've got to make sure that the working environments are created that enable people to gently move back into business, not as usual, but business in whatever will develop in the weeks and months ahead. The economy is going to look different, and let's be clear about this: there are businesses that have closed. There are businesses that have sort of closed down partially, and I think that that's going to mean that the demand in the economy is going to be different. So government's done a great job here, but they need to be careful about just taking their foot off that accelerator of support too soon. The government needs to be very careful, listen to the business representative organisations. Listen to the Little Soap Company and Emma, and I know Emma is well connected in terms of various sort of public networks, and it's really important that she does get her message across.
Yeah, sure, and I think in the next few days and weeks, the government's going to start its planning. So perhaps at some point we can get you back on, Mark, to discuss how the government's approaching that. Mark Hart, Professor of Small Business and Entrepreneurship at Aston Business School, many thanks for joining us again on this podcast.
Always a pleasure, Steve.
Thanks also to Emma Heathcote-James of the Little Soap Company for sharing the news about the sharp rise in demand her company is experiencing. Hopefully this shows how some businesses can and will continue to prosper despite the lockdown. We'll be back in the next few days with more case studies of how businesses are coping and with more crucial analysis and advice from academics and experts here at Aston. Aston means business. SMEs dealing with COVID-19. Thanks for listening.